Let's get right into it. 1. Don't argue, be a role model. There are moments in life that don't need to be dramatic to hurt your heart. Sometimes it's just a dismissive glance, a word that interrupts a family dinner, or a sentence cut short and brushed aside. You're speaking with your whole heart, and the very child you once cradled, cared for, and protected for decades reacts as if what you're saying no longer matters. That kind of pain isn't like a physical blow. It goes much deeper. It hurts in the place where you once believed you were still valued. You might ask yourself, does my child not respect me anymore? Did I do something wrong? Or is it simply because I've gotten old? Here's what I want you to know first. That feeling doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you small. That feeling is proof that you still care, that you still hope, that you still want to be seen, and seen in a way you truly deserve. Because any mother, any father who has poured their heart into raising a child longs for one very human thing: to have their love reflected back through respect. And often our first reaction to being dismissed is resistance. We try to explain. We speak louder. We remind them of the old days, when our children used to listen intently, when we were the center of the family. We recount the sacrifices, the nameless years, the invisible scars that were never voiced, all just to make them pause for a moment, listen a little, understand a bit more. But you know what? The more we try that, the more disheartened we feel. The more we say, the less they hear. The more we try to gain their respect, the more our resistance unintentionally makes things worse. Because here's a harsh but simple truth. Arguments don't earn respect. They only teach people to avoid us. When you argue just to be heard, you're placing yourself in a weaker position, like you're begging for attention, fighting for something that should already be a given. Respect doesn't come from raising your voice. It comes from your presence. It's not in emotional reasoning, but in how you walk into a room, how you hold your silence, how you quietly remove yourself from an unhealthy conversation. I will never forget a man named Frank, a teacher of over 30 years, respected wherever he went, admired by students, revered by colleagues. But at home, with the very children he had raised with his whole heart and the wear of his aging back, that respect faded. His kids interrupted him, dismissed him, and sometimes even laughed at what he said. He felt angry. He felt let down. And like so many parents, he chose to fight back. He raised his voice. He reminded them of what he had done, what he had endured. But the more he did, the more distant his children became. Until one day Frank stopped. No more arguing, no more justifying. He started listening, not to counter, but to understand. He only spoke when it truly mattered. And when he did speak, his words no longer sounded like commands, but carried a calm, grounded confidence, the kind his children could no longer ignore. He no longer tried to reclaim respect. He became the embodiment of it. And that, more than anything, began to change his children. If you've ever been interrupted, don't raise your voice right away. If you've been dismissed, don't rush to explain. Look at your child and gently say, "Go ahead and finish. I'll share after." Step out of the room when emotions rise and return only once you've regained calm. Be steady like a pillar, needing no validation, but impossible to overlook. Show your child you don't need to shout to be respected, because you've already learned to respect yourself first. And slowly, something magical will happen. Your child will begin to notice you more. They'll listen longer, ask more questions, and look at you differently. Not as someone who's just always there, but as someone they can't ignore. Because respect, once rebuilt through silence, steadiness, and quiet strength, is the kind of respect that lasts. And if today you're wondering what the first step is to changing how your child treats you, the answer is simple. Stop arguing. Live as a role model, gentle yet clear, quiet yet impossible to dismiss. 2. Stop giving if it's not appreciated. There's something truly unique about a parent's love. We give endlessly, without counting, without expecting anything in return. From early mornings spent cooking every meal, to silently borrowing money just so our children can have a proper education, it all comes from a deep place within. A place that never once asks, will they be grateful? But over the years, as our children grow up, as they build their own lives, and as our hair slowly turns gray, there comes a moment when you realize your giving is no longer appreciated like it once was. The words thank you become scarce. The help you offer, from financial support to babysitting, starts to feel expected. No one asks if you're tired. No one waits for your consent. And worse, sometimes when you say no, you're the one being blamed. The beauty of giving slowly begins to fade. Instead of building closeness and connection, it turns into a burden, not just for you, but even for the receiver, when they no longer recognize where the boundaries are, where love ends and obligation begins. I once met a man named George. He was the ideal kind of father, quiet, kind, always putting his children first. When they needed money, he gave. When they moved house, he was the first one there. When his grandchild was sick, he skipped his own doctor's appointment to help care for them. His belief was simple: as long as I'm alive and healthy, I'll help my children. But over time, he came to a heartbreaking realization, not through harsh words, but through silence. No one thanked him anymore. No one asked if he needed anything. His help was no longer seen as a gift, but as a duty. And when he needed something, when he was hospitalized, when he needed a ride, when he simply wanted someone to accompany him to a routine checkup, everyone was suddenly too busy. He didn't get angry. He just felt deeply sad. And then one day he made a quiet decision to stop. No speeches, no blame. He just stopped helping. When a child asked to borrow money, he replied, "I can't manage it this time." When asked to babysit, he gently said, "I already have an appointment, dear." At first, his children were irritated. Some were upset. Others said nothing. But then something began to shift. His children started checking in on him more often. They began planning ahead. They started saying, "Thank you, Dad." What happened? George didn't do anything extraordinary. He simply stopped at the right moment. He gave when it was appreciated and stepped back when it no longer was. And in doing so, the value of what he gave found its true meaning again. Dear friend, sacrifice is not a mistake, but sacrifice that goes unrecognized, when prolonged, becomes a habit, one that causes others to forget you are human too. You get tired. You have emotions. You also need to be loved, not just to always be the one who gives, who's simply there. And here's a question I invite you to ask yourself today, gently, without judgment. Are you giving so much that others now take it for granted? If you stop tomorrow, would they feel grateful or just inconvenienced? If the answer stirs something heavy in your chest, then maybe it's time to stop. Not to punish anyone, but to remind yourself that love must also be nourished by appreciation, that you can't keep pouring from an empty cup. Start with the small things. Say no when you're tired. Don't rush to help if you weren't asked respectfully. Only do what brings you peace, not what leaves you drained. Because giving only holds meaning when it comes from joy, and when the one who receives knows how to say thank you, even if it's just through a glance or a soft-spoken word. And if today you decide to stop, let me say this to you. You are not selfish. You are choosing to love yourself. And from that place, your worth will be restored. 3. Build a life of your own. Don't depend on your children. Let me tell you about Louise, a woman I've deeply admired since the first time we met. For 42 years, she was a top heart surgeon in Boston, a woman with golden hands, someone who saved hundreds of lives, someone the entire hospital stood and applauded for on the day she retired. Under the glowing lights that day, everyone believed she would spend the rest of her life in peace and fulfillment. But what no one knew was that just a few months into retirement, Louise fell into a deep crisis. No more high-stakes surgeries, no more emergency calls, and worse, she no longer felt needed. She moved in near her daughter's home, hoping at the very least to help with the grandkids, support the household, and find some joy. But things didn't go as she imagined. Her daughter was busy. Her grandchild was at school all day. Louise cleaned the house, cooked, did laundry, but words of gratitude became fewer and fewer. Though they lived under the same roof, she felt like a stranger. Every evening, she sat alone in her room, rereading old patient files, holding her faded white lab coat in her arms and quietly weeping. "Is this the end of my role in life?" she whispered, eyes red with sorrow. One day, her 7-year-old granddaughter asked her, "Grandma, why aren't you happy like before?" That innocent question shook her awake. She looked in the mirror. The once strong woman now seemed frail and hollow. And then, she told herself, "I used to save hearts for a living. Why am I letting my own heart wither away like this?" From that day, she began a new journey, a journey of living for herself. At first, she simply took morning walks, alone, no phone. Then she joined a senior yoga class. She learned to cook Thai food. Despite having eaten only hospital cafeteria salads her whole career, she enrolled in a memoir writing course. And one day she stood up to share her life story at a women's conference. The first time she cried in public, not from work stress, but because she finally felt alive again. Gradually, her daughter began to notice. Her granddaughter proudly told classmates, "My grandma's a doctor, and she's writing a book." She was no longer just the helper in the house. She was herself again, a woman who was independent, joyful, and living with purpose. I once asked her, "What helped you make such a powerful change?" She smiled. "Because I realized one thing. If I don't live for myself, no one else can do it for me." Dear friend, I'm not telling Louise's story so you'll admire her. I'm telling it so you'll see. You can begin again too, no matter your age, no matter who you used to be. You don't have to be a doctor. You just have to believe that your life still holds value. And that value doesn't come from how much you help your children. It comes from the moment you dare to step out and live for yourself. Start today, even if it's just a quiet morning cup of tea by yourself, a trial art class, a simple moment of saying no when you're tired. Rewrite your daily schedule, one where you are at the center, not your children. And if you've ever felt like Louise, lost, lonely, thinking your purpose has ended, I invite you to leave a message below. I'm coming back to life, for myself. No need to explain, no need to ask permission, because you, a woman who has sacrificed so much, absolutely deserve a life that feels more vibrant than ever. If this message touched something in your heart, please like, share, and comment. Who knows, your journey of rebirth might just be the light for another woman silently shrinking in her own lonely corner. It's never too late to start over, but you must start today. 4. Take back your emotional independence. Let me tell you another story about Helen, a woman whose eyes were always warm, but whose voice carried a trace of longing. She was once a beloved literature teacher, passionate about language, living for beauty, inspiring hundreds of students to treasure every line of poetry, every word in prose. But after retirement and the early death of her husband, she moved into a small house at the end of the street, with one simple hope, that her children would call more often, that she could hear her grandchildren's voices, that she would still feel present in someone else's life. At first, she called once a week, then twice, then 3 times. At the beginning, her children answered, but eventually, as they were busy. Some days she called 5 times, only to get a text back. "In a meeting, Mom." Sometimes a whole week went by with no call, and she began to question herself. Am I being a burden? Maybe they really are busy. Or am I just not that important anymore? That kind of loneliness isn't loud. It quietly eats away at the heart day after day. Even while gardening, shopping, or reading, she could still feel an emptiness. A part of her was always waiting. Waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for a FaceTime from her grandchild, waiting for any sign that she was still being thought of. Until one day she sat silently in front of the mirror for a long time, and she realized what drained her the most wasn't her children's silence. It was her own emotional dependency on their attention. It's me. I'm the one making myself suffer. I've placed my happiness in someone else's hands, and they're just busy living their lives. I can't blame my children for not calling when I haven't even learned how to befriend the silence. From that moment on, Helen began to change. She turned off her phone in the evenings. She kept it on silent in the mornings. She woke up earlier and started walking with a group of women in her neighborhood. She began practicing gentle morning meditation, brewing a cup of ginger tea just for herself, not for someone who might drop by. She kept an emotional journal, not to blame her children, but to better understand her own heart. Each page she wrote became a step away from dependence. And oddly enough, the moment she stopped waiting, the phone began to ring again. Her son called just to say, "How have you been, Mom?" Her granddaughter shared a new drawing. No one spoke it aloud, but the whole family began to feel the shift. She had changed. No longer someone longing to be filled, she had become a quiet source of light. You see, the moment we stop tying our emotional state to others is the moment we reclaim freedom in our own soul. If you're feeling worn out from waiting to be loved more, remembered more, given more time, I invite you to stop. Not because those people don't matter, but because you matter more than anything. True peace comes from within, not from a phone call, a message, or someone else's attention. It comes from how you care for your own heart, gently, kindly, and without abandoning yourself. I know this isn't easy, but give it a try. Start by creating one small joy each day that has nothing to do with your children or grandchildren. A coffee with an old friend, an hour with a good book, a favorite song, one little thing that makes you feel alive. For you, not for anyone else's approval. And if today you choose to take back your emotional independence, write this down in the comments. I choose to nurture peace from within. Let that sentence be a commitment to a new chapter, where you're no longer the one waiting, but the one gently leading your own life forward. If this message touched something soft in your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with another woman you know who may be quietly waiting for love and attention, yet doesn't know how to ask. Because sometimes all it takes is one step back to move forward into strength and freedom. 5. Stop chasing your children's approval. I know many mothers and grandmothers out there, women who have spent their entire lives loving, protecting, and sacrificing for their children, who now live with a quiet longing to be acknowledged. To hear their children say, "You did everything right. You're the most important person in my life. I'm so grateful for you." And because they wait for those words, some have chosen to shrink themselves, to stay silent even when hurt, to nod in agreement when their heart disagrees, to give in, even when their child is clearly wrong. Not because they can't tell right from wrong, but because they're afraid. Afraid of losing their child's love. Afraid that if they speak their truth, that fragile connection might shatter. I once met a woman named Margaret, sharp, strong, once the head of a family business, once the kind of woman who could speak confidently in front of hundreds. But after retirement, living with her children, she started to grow smaller. Whenever her son raised his voice, she stayed silent. When her daughter criticized how she lived, she forced a smile. "I just want to keep the peace," she said. "As long as they still talk to me, I can bear anything." But what she didn't realize was that every time she stayed silent, she was slowly erasing herself in her children's eyes. Her son stopped asking for her opinion. Her daughter saw her only as a babysitter. No one asked, "What do you think, Mom?" Because they'd gotten used to a mother who always said yes. Until one day, Margaret sat down and opened an old notebook, one where she'd once written her values and life principles as a younger woman. And she cried. She no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. She had traded away her sense of self for an approval that never came. That's when she decided to change. She stopped nodding automatically. She no longer canceled plans with friends to babysit. She no longer stayed silent when spoken to unfairly. She didn't shout, didn't sulk. She calmly said, "I respect you, but I also need you to respect me." And you know what? At first her children pushed back, annoyed. But eventually, they began to look at her differently, with respect. Dear friend, what I want to tell you today is simple but powerful. You do not need to chase your children's approval to prove your worth. Real love does not require permission to exist, and real respect doesn't come from your silence. It comes from the self-respect you show yourself. If you feel your children drifting away, even though you keep giving in, keep sacrificing, maybe it's time to stop and ask yourself, am I doing this out of love or out of fear of not being loved? Be brave enough to make a change. Start small. Say no when something doesn't feel right. Speak up when your child is wrong. Don't cancel your personal plans just to meet their last-minute needs. And most importantly, allow yourself to live in alignment with your true feelings. Because only when you stop chasing validation from the outside can you truly be seen from within. And if today you want to end the exhausting pursuit of recognition, I invite you to comment with this simple sentence: I choose self-respect, not approval. This isn't just a statement, it's a declaration, a door to a new chapter where you live as yourself, speak from your heart, and are loved for the true worth you've always carried. If this message made your heart quietly nod in agreement, please share it with another mother or grandmother you know, someone who may also be waiting silently for someone to finally recognize all they've given. Because sometimes what a woman needs isn't to be praised, but to be reminded she doesn't need to earn love. She has always been worthy of it. 6. Set boundaries and stand by them. We're often taught that being a parent means being forgiving, patient, and endlessly giving. That's true, but only halfway. Because if all you ever do is give in, be kind, and stay silent without clear boundaries, then sadly what you're really teaching your children is, you can treat me however you want. I know that sounds harsh, maybe even cold, but my friend, kindness without boundaries turns into submission. And submission doesn't earn respect. It only makes people used to hurting you without consequences. I once met a man named Robert, a kind, well-respected former executive of a major company. He was known for his decisiveness, principles, and leadership over hundreds of employees. Yet within his own family, he was overly lenient in a heartbreaking way. When his son interrupted him, he laughed it off. When his daughter criticized how he spent money in retirement, he stayed silent. During family dinners, when he gently offered an opinion and was ignored, he swallowed it down, thinking, as long as we're all still gathering, that's enough. But one evening at dinner, while telling a story, his son cut him off and said, "Dad, you're so old-fashioned." That sentence, and the silence from everyone else, felt like the final blow. Robert set down his chopsticks, stood up, and calmly said something the whole family would never forget. "When you're ready to listen, I'll finish my story." He wasn't angry, he didn't shout. He simply stood and walked away from the table. For the first time, he didn't yield. And for the first time, the whole family saw it. The line, the boundary between love and self-respect. From that day on, Robert changed. He was no longer the man who always said yes, no longer the one expected to always be there. When interrupted, he stopped speaking. When his opinion wasn't asked, he didn't offer it. But when he did speak, he was clear, calm, and firm. At first, his children didn't like it. They said he was being difficult, that he was different. But over time, they adjusted. They began asking, "What do you think, Dad?" They stopped interrupting. They listened, because they understood if they wanted their father to stay present in their lives, they had to treat him as a respected adult, not as someone whose role had ended. Dear friend, if you feel your children no longer respect you, ask yourself one honest question. Am I allowing this behavior to continue? Because you can be kind, loving, and devoted. But if you don't express your boundaries, if you don't respond when hurt, your children won't learn where the line is. Setting boundaries doesn't mean starting a war. It's an act of love, but love that's responsible, both toward yourself and those you care about. I know, maybe you're afraid. Maybe you think that being firm will push your children away. But the truth is, if they walk away just because you asked to be treated with respect, that relationship wasn't healthy to begin with. And if you stay strong, if you truly love yourself, they will come back with different eyes, with a different attitude. Because no one can ignore a person who knows their worth. No one can belittle someone who lives with principles, with dignity, and still with love. If you've never set boundaries before, start today. When interrupted, pause and say, "I'll continue when you're ready to listen." When treated disrespectfully, speak up. "I don't allow anyone to speak to me that way." When demands feel unreasonable, ask, "Do you think that's fair?" And when needed, step back, not out of anger, but to give space for reflection, because you deserve to be valued. And if today you're ready to redefine how you allow others to treat you, leave a comment below. "I love with limits to protect myself." Let that sentence be your first boundary, the line between who you were yesterday, always yielding out of fear, and who you are today, calm, strong, and self-respecting. And if this message touched a hidden pain you've carried for too long, please share it with a friend or a loved one who may also feel overlooked in their own family. Because sometimes all it takes is for one person to stand up and draw the line, for the next generation to learn how to love and respect differently. Dear friend, if you've made it this far, I truly believe that something, even just a little, has stirred within you. Maybe you've realized that you've been giving too much without being appreciated. Maybe you've come to see that peace doesn't come from how often your children call, but from how deeply you love yourself. Or maybe, just maybe, you felt it's time to draw new boundaries, not to push anyone away, but to protect the quiet worth that lives inside you. The lesson today isn't about how to take back power in the family. It's about how you, a woman of experience and deep love, can move into the next chapter of life with calm, dignity, and genuine joy. When you lead with stillness, when you speak less but live more fully, you not only regain your children's respect, you also pass down a living legacy that matters to the generations after you. If this video touched something in your heart, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Share how you feel, or simply leave a message to affirm the path you're choosing next. We read every word, every line, because this isn't just a video. It's a community where you are seen, heard, and valued. And if you'd like to support us in creating more heartfelt, meaningful videos like this one, you can click the Super Thanks button, a special way YouTube allows you to say thank you to creators who made a difference. Every small gesture helps us reach more people with kindness and healing. Also, if you're on a journey to heal, to rediscover joy, and reconnect in your later years, click the video now appearing on your screen, or choose one of the recommended videos nearby. It might hold the exact message your heart needs right now. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are worthy of love and of a life filled with peace, dignity, and grace. We'll see you in the next video. Wishing you a warm and lighthearted day.